There are times when you want to take the spirit of a monster and master it. This week on Schedule for Launch, join me, Zach Walsh, as I speak with Tristan Fishel about his mega-sized Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition supplement, the Tome of Monsters. Representing every creature in the Monster Manual, play out your fantasy as you wield their monstrous abilities to magnificent effect. We talk about monsters, building classes, and improvising. Welcome to Schedule for Launch, a podcast to discover the projects that you may have missed. This week, I am super excited to be joined by yet another wonderful creator. Tristan, thank you so much for coming onto the show with me this week. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
It's one of those things where it's been a little while since I've recorded, so I'm a little rusty, let me know. But there was this huge amount where I got a lot of people who talked to me over the summer, and then I didn't record for 2 months.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're happy to have you here, and I'm really excited to be talking about. We're going to be mainly focusing on the Tomo monsters today, but you have so much cool stuff in your little repertoire there of games. You got some really cool stuff that's upcoming that you told me about. I'm really excited to be talking about that with you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's there's a lot going on, so it's good to have a focus.
Well, before we get talking about your projects, though, do you mind telling the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Tristan Fishel. Hi. I've been playing role-playing games for a really long time. I started with my brother when I was little. He would run me through his D&D dungeons to try to test them. So I was a guinea pig for a while before I was actually playing. But once I got into it, I really got into it, and I was just my family was pretty deeply immersed in a lot of that sort of nerd culture stuff. So it's been a big part of my life, and once I got to a certain point, I got really into design, at first for home games, and then I got into it more from a freelancing perspective.
Okay. That's actually how we met, that freelancing part, because of Sneak Attack Press's Graveyard of the Gods. You were one of the people who wrote on it. Which adventures are you writing / did you write for?
So for Graveyard of the Gods, I wrote the Isles of Metal, which was the corpse of the war god.
Yes.
Where people fought for eternal glory and mined his divine armor and stuff like that.
I think we talked pretty in depth about that one too, actually. That was one of the ones we went pretty heavy into examples with.
That's great. I'm glad to hear it.
There's a lot of cool stuff to have, and you are specifically what we're talking about with your projects today is actually a lot of the 5e supplements that you've done, and how you've designed some of this stuff is so cool and adds so much to their world. And we're going to talk about more D&D stuff in just a moment. But I noticed there that you mentioned that your family was really into the whole nerd culture. We were talking before about Lord of the Rings. So do you remember your first real click with the genre and that nerd culture?
My first real click. This is probably the case for a good number of people, but I think it would have to be, like you were saying, Lord of the Rings, that Lord of the Rings trilogy, those movies.
Yeah.
They're such an approachable way to get it. They're the gateway drug into nerd stuff. So there was a fair amount going on, but I think those might be the first things where my brother made me sit down and marathon them.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
How old were you?
I'm not sure. I was pretty young. He's 10 years older than I am. So
Okay.
he was very into it. And I've worked on him with a lot of writing projects and stuff like that
Hmm.
for like tabletop content. Um, I think I would have been probably like 7 or 8, maybe a little bit older.
Okay. So realistically, you've been going for about as long as you really can to grasp what you're watching.
Yeah,
And then it just kind of evolved from there then.
absolutely. Yeah, so that was an introduction. I definitely uh tabletops came not long after that. Especially, I mean, D&D was my intro, and my brother got me like a Pathfinder starter set for one of my birthdays, the first edition of Pathfinder.
Hmm.
Uh, 13th Age, Blades in the Dark, kind of more recent interests. But yeah, so all of that stuff, I'd say a lot of it stemmed from Lord of the Rings, just because I liked seeing the cool guys fight with swords and the hobbits talking about meals and stuff.
It's a weird combination, but yeah, I get you.
It really is.
So, what was your first edition then?
Of D&D.
Yeah, I guess that would be the one there.
It was 3.5. But I don't know if my brother ever even owned the books. We had like the starter set. I distinctly remember we would walk to our neighbor's house a lot to like borrow the player's handbook and stuff because he was the one that owned them.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
so 3.5 is where I started. I dabbled in fourth a little bit, and then fifth I think is where a lot of people got like more into it. Just I was at the right age, and it
Yeah.
was very approachable. Yeah.
Yeah, fifth was my first edition of D&D. Not my first tabletop game, but it was definitely my first edition. And then I went all over the place on what I was playing. So
Yeah.
it's been an adventure with that company, and there's a lot of stuff going on with it. Some good, some less good, but like people are talking about it, and more people in the tabletop role-playing game space isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
But Tristan, that is not what we're here to talk about right now. We're here to talk about your stuff here. So, what is the Tome of Monsters?
So the Tome of Monsters is a massive player-focused expansion to 5e. Uh, it's mostly subclasses.
Yeah.
The main, like the elevator pitch for it is one subclass for every monster in the monster manual. And then there's also a few feats and spells and stuff like that are all monster themed thrown in there as well. But the vast majority of it is just dozens and dozens and dozens of new subclasses.
It's rad. It's 183 pages. I think it's like 174 without like credits and like the end cards and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But like it's so much, and like I think you only got like 8 feats. So it's like it's mostly subclasses. It's rad.
It's a lot of subclasses. Yeah, I sort of ran out of time towards the end to add more feats and spells, if I'm being honest. But I think a little cherry on the top there.
So how'd this thing come up to be? Because like obviously most people would be like they had that conversation with the GM where they've polymorphed themselves or they want to polymorph themselves. The DM's like, no, you can't do that. It's too powerful, or that's not what the rules say. And we all want to play the monsters. Let's be honest. We all want to play the monsters sometimes.
Absolutely. We all want to
not
wild
DM.
shape into the owl bear.
Exactly. So where did this come from? Because it's a huge project.
Yeah, it really is. So this definitely came from that urge. That sort of like I want to be more monstrous. I want to be more involved because the monsters are like a big draw of D&D. You got the big old beholder on the cover or what of the monster manual. And I had a player who was very, very interested in that aspect, and he felt like he couldn't find kind of that sort of he couldn't find quite the right fit with the available stuff. So I was thinking about what a sort of cool, like more monster themed subclass would be. And there is this excellent project on the DM's Guild. The title escapes me right now, but it's easy to find. I think it's just something along the lines of like, D&D playable monstrous races or something like that.
Oh yes, I think I actually know exactly which one you're talking about.
It's a playable race.
Yeah.
For every monster in the monster manual. And I thought about it and I was like, that is insane. That is a massive project. And my player loved that one. And that helped him kind of find that more monstrous feel he was looking for. And I ended up just sort of combining that concept of many, 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 many monsters with a more accessibility for the players, basically.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the thing here. I think because you have, I think the least one is like clerics, and it's still like 12 subclasses.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did balancing go into these, or was it just kind of like building around certain guidelines and making sure nothing was too overpowered?
That's how it started. I tried my absolute best to test these. Personally, I couldn't do all of them by myself. I had some friends help me out, and we would run a ton. This started a long time ago, so when kind of quarantine was still
just starting out,
very important in my area. Yeah, we ran a lot of online games. So most of these are tested, at least lightly. Some of them, some of the just the ones that we were more excited about got tested a couple times. I had players use these in like, campaigns. Initially, yeah, it was definitely more focused around like, okay, at this level, 5th level artificers need to have basically the equivalent of a second attack, but it's different for everyone how you got to do that, and it sort of grew from there.
Mm-hmm. So with so many, there's obviously some favorites. Which ones are you either exceptionally proud of or you just really like?
Let me think about it. The one that comes to mind off the top of my head is the Godmaker domain for the clerics. That was based off of the I'm blanking on their names, the Kuatoa from the Monster Manual. Who are like not. I have not used them much in my games, just like little fish people. And when I was working on this project, I came to appreciate them more because their lore is super interesting. They like make their own gods basically. But when they do so, the more of them that believe in that god, the more like that collective belief manifests into actual power. And that sounded like a really fun idea for a cleric subclass. So that one operates around you kind of try to sway people to this new god, and the more powerful you become, the more followers you can bring to it. That god manifests and gives you actual power, kind of based around what you think that god is. So it's a very flexible domain.
See, I like that a lot because there are a number of actual plays and home games where you have the cleric kind of try to build a cult. We'll say it's like a super common trope. They even, Critical Role did it in their previous session. They dealt with that with Laura Bailey's character, and having an entire kind of character right down to the subclass built around that is super intriguing to me. I love that. My personal favorite is the Tundra Walker, because, as I said before in the pre-show, I am very partial to Rangers thematically. Also super drawn to like tundra and desert. So, and Yetis. Yetis are cool. Let's be honest.
That is absolutely true.
Super common in all lore, but like Yetis are rad.
Absolutely. Yeah. There were definitely some pretty major challenges. I think the biggest one was honestly just trying to keep everything not only distinct from like what already exists, but from each other, just because the sheer number of subclasses. Um, I really didn't want to end up just like rehashing things uh, and producing, a bunch of very similar uh, subclasses. And because of that, I will. So I say every monster in the monster manual. That's true. Some of them ended up being, like the Lizard Folk King and the Lizard Folk Warrior didn't each get a subclass, but that turned into one Lizard Folk themed subclass.
Yeah, it's more so the archetype of the monster.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not like you had an individual one for like every I don't know, beholder, because there's like 40 different types of beholders at this point. Or water elemental. That's probably like a better one to go with. There's a couple of really fun ones. I mean, I think even like the Flump has its own character
the Flump
subclass.
Does have its own subclass.
I love Flumps, man. For those of you who are wondering, the Flump subclass is called the Fervor Magic Sorcerer. And they are actually really, really well built and very fun in the Tomo monsters. I really like how your Fervor Magic one is built.
I'm really glad.
I think the thing that makes it so distinct, though, is that like you really did, for the most part, like, I mean, obviously when you're making 70 plus new subclasses, some of them will like overlap sometimes, but everything feels so distinct. And it really does capture those monsters' tropes in a really interesting, fun way.
Yeah, that's really great to hear, because that was definitely my number one priority when designing all of this was keeping them distinct, keeping that kind of flavor of the monster. That was very, very important to me.
Now, Tristan, do you have a particular favorite monster that you were really excited to design for?
A favorite monster. I am a big fan of I'm a really big fan of Sphinxes.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Sort of thematically, I really enjoy the Sphinxes, and the one of them was a wizard sub, because there's two in the monster manual. One of them became a wizard subclass, which is definitely one of my favorites. That's sort of about full depth of knowledge, and you can affect your spells in weird ways. It's sort of reminiscent of the Battle Master, the fighter subclass.
Yes.
So it gives maneuvers for spells and stuff like that instead of attacks. And I love kobolds. Those are probably...
Yeah. I love
those
kobolds.
are probably my favorites.
I think that they are one of the most fun groups of monsters to use.
Absolutely.
Kobolds are amazing. Just GMs out there who are listening to this. Kobolds are great.
Kobolds are great.
Make sure you build their lair fun, and you can actually cause some really big issues for your players with the weakest monsters in the game.
Yeah. So I adore kobolds.
They're one of those monsters that I think are just like a fun one to use, and like everybody knows them. When they come up,
Yeah.
people laugh. I think your kobold archetype is actually an artificer, isn't it?
It is, yeah, the Trapper.
I'll have to look at that one after because that sounds super fun. Tristan, as a 5e designer, there is a lot of content coming out for it all the time.
Mhm.
It's obviously because it's so widespread, but what do you think really what do you think the drive is for folks to start creating for 5e? What drove you? What do you think might be the thing that really sparks people to homebrew for this game?
I think D&D, it has like a huge impact on the tabletop industry. It's really well known. A lot of people, it's their first introduction to the hobby.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's got a lot of appeal. It's got that classic high fantasy feel. It's got a relatively simple to use system, especially 5e. And I think when you put all that together, the thing that really makes people want to do homebrew is they're just having a good time with their friends and they want to just tell more stories.
Mm-hmm.
They want to introduce those new ideas. I know that's definitely how I got into it. It was never something I intended to do professionally. It just sort of evolved because I was just messing around making stuff for my games. Monsters, magic items, new player options, all those things. I think it's just that urge people who are playing have to kind of broaden the types of stories that they can tell and kind of tailor it to their table.
I think that's one of the flexibilities with 5e as well, is the number, or the ease, I should say, not even the number, of really quick, really simple home rules that you can make. I know recently I've been running a 5e game for my partner and some of her friends, and we wanted to make criticals a little, like your critical hits on your natural 20 attacks, a little more masochistic. And that was really easy to do because what a player character can do, a monster gets to do back, right? That's just how we ruled our nat 20s.
Yeah.
We almost lost a character our first game to a bugbear. Minds of Phandalver. Early game design, rough on new players. Just gonna throw it out there. It's before they found their stride. But I think that I agree on that part there. It's easy to design for. And I think you see it in the indie communities too. The issues with 5e are easy to work around. And if you're telling the stories about wanting to be heroes and adventures, it's really easy to do. It's easy to visualize it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that adds to it and adds to how character creation, or not character creation, content creation works for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Tristan, are there any monsters in the Tomo monster that you missed out on that you really wanted to create for, but just like either didn't have the time or couldn't figure out a way to do it justice?
Every monster in there got something, or every type of monster. The only things I didn't touch were the animals and the NPCs, kind of in the appendices in the back.
Right, so like the beasts and the human like mercenaries and stuff like that.
Yeah, so there was always a part of me. There was always a part of me that kind of wanted to make something for some of the animals. Not all of, just some of the weird ones, because there's like, even though they're in the beast section, there's things like the blink dog and stuff. Where I was like, that would make for a cool subclass, but I was already running low on time, and I was like, if I touch some of it, I'm gonna want to try to do all of it. So I ended up just kind of leaving that appendix alone. which I regret a little bit, but I managed to get everything else. So I felt pretty good about it overall.
And I think something that's important to remind listeners too, this is, for the most part, the monster manual, not Tome Foes or Volo's Guide to Beasts.
Yes, yeah.
Because there are a lot of really cool things in those books too. But this document would have taken you 4 years to write had you
Yeah, there was only so far I could go.
But I think you've done them justice. I handpicked a couple that I really liked the sound of when I was really what I did was I looked at some of my favorite monsters in the monster manual, and then I used a search function to see if they were in the book, and the answer for the most part was yes. And then I saw how you built them out, and I like it. I really like this book. I could definitely see it, especially from a fairness perspective as well, because it is, like, as far as I can tell, I can't see anything that's, like, overly broken, which is usually a huge issue with homebrew stuff, is you find one class that you really like, and you really like it. I've done it before when writing stuff. I've made that, and all the GMs out there know what I'm talking about. You make that one character, or that one class, or that one monster. It's a little too tough.
Absolutely.
But you definitely made them, like, really easy to find, really easy to work with, and really easy to implement for players.
That's great to hear. Yeah, it was definitely, that temptation was there. That temptation was definitely there. And there's always kind of a challenge, right? How do I make a kobold subclass equal in power to, a Tarask subclass?
Yeah.
And for the most part, the mechanics of the game were super useful for guiding that. So overall, but that temptation was definitely there.
But that's one of the things there. It's, you were able to kind of keep it in control there and keep it going. Tristan, you've also worked on a couple other projects, and one that I think is actually really important, super short read, and that is Improvisation at the Table.
Yeah.
I think it's actually 8 pages long after the text and stuff. And this is just a breakdown of, I would even say rules, but guidelines on improving at the table. It's super useful. I was a drama teacher at, like, a summer camp, and I do voice work now, and you've hit the improv stuff, like, right on the head. Why do you think it was, like, important enough for you to write this down and put it out there for players and game masters to get their hands on?
So I run a very role play heavy game, just because that's what I enjoy. That's what my players really enjoy. My first, like, consistent D&D group was a bunch of my friends from theater class in high school. And so I always kind of struggled with adjusting to what they wanted to do, right? When they wanted to drive the story, it can be really tricky for new GMs, myself included, when I was starting out, to adjust for whatever tomfoolery they end up getting into, whenever they go off track and you have nothing prepared. That was something I really struggled with, and I joined my high school improv team, and a couple months in, I realized there was a noticeable increase in the quality of my game, and just kind of my enjoyment of it. It felt a lot less stressful. It felt a lot less stressful overall. And I started thinking about that more, and I talked with my brother about it a fair amount. And that's sort of those core tenets, right? Obviously, improvised sketch comedy doesn't transfer over perfectly into a tabletop game about fantasy, but those core concepts are those core concepts are absolutely invaluable. Um, Not just for players going off script, but for when they fail a check, when they are not doing well in a fight, when they don't make their athletics roll and they start to fall off a cliff.
Yeah.
You don't want them to just fall and go splat and then call it a night, and that's where everything ends. So those tenets of improv, about basically just moving forward, are so useful to any story-driven game, I think.
I can definitely agree with that. I have distinct memories of games I've played where I have failed to check and then wasn't sure what to do with my character because I was kind of left in dead air, I think is the best way to put it. We'll go to a very common D&D enemy, the door. When everybody fails their check to get through the door, and this is going to happen at least once, what do you do then? Because even the GM is like, I don't know why you can't get through this door. Just sometimes it just hates you. And you need that backup plan because it can't just be the door just opens on your natural 2. I feel bad. We all want to move on. Your natural 2 gets the door open.
Yeah, that is the bane of every GM's existence. You hit it right on the head of the nail there. That when the barbarian can't kick it down and the rogue can't pick the lock and the wizard can't unlock it with magic, what do you do then?
Yeah, and it's just like, yeah, we missed something. Because I think the great thing too is like it's such an important skill in this hobby is at least having an understanding of improv because it makes the experience more enjoyable for everybody. And I think that how you've written it specifically, not even what you've written, it's more of a guide to best practices than it is hard rules. It's a short, really, really quite in-depth read on just things to keep in mind. You don't need to memorize the improv book. It's just good to know your core tenets.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. It definitely felt like it would be sort of counterintuitive to write like a big thick tome about improvising. So that, the focus is mostly on a few core ideas that you just keep them in mind, apply when necessary. They're nice to have, and it can really change your game a lot.
There's some that just need to be done too. Like you should, as a GM, be doing them, like taking in-session notes or consulting with your players. Those are so important to do those. Know what your players want to do so that you don't have a boring game.
Like, yeah, exactly.
Talk to each other.
Talk to your players. Number 1 rule.
You should probably be playing this game with people you consider friends, or at least want to be friends with. Talk to your friends, please. I've seen too many campaigns fall apart and friendships get ruined because people will not talk to their friends. Another thing that's kind of been big in the D&D community right now has actually been the relatively recent announcement of D&D 1. I know that earlier today, and we talked a little bit about this in the pre-show, was some of the announcements about their class reworks and stuff like that, and how they plan on releasing Unearthed Arcana with the build up to D&D 1. What are your thoughts on it so far?
So far, I'm pretty excited. Uh, when we're recording right now, they just released sort of the preamble to the next packet that's coming out, the second packet. But we don't actually have the packet yet. We have an interview about the packet.
Yeah, that's true.
But I'm very excited. I think the the more people we have, right, giving feedback, um, the better this is going to end up being for sure. And I'm grateful that the process seems pretty open so far. Uh, Lots of opportunities to kind of read through it, test it out,
Yeah.
voice our thoughts, our opinions. But a lot of the changes they're making, I so far, I mean, again, not much has. We only have the one packet right now, but a lot of the changes they're making, I thought were at the very least interesting. And some of those I thought were pretty good.
I like the concept of what they're doing. I have some issues with the execution. They've definitely had some poor choices made.
That is definitely true.
Yeah. The idea that they're sending across is one that I think is a large company that is starting to take take some good steps to making something that's as inclusive and well-rounded as it claimed to be 5 years ago. I have a lot of hope for it. I'm excited to hopefully be able to play a ranger.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see how they're going to balance things. Because
Me
even in
too.
that video, they talked a little bit about their own, not concerns, but the process of balancing classes. So I'm excited to see how it turns out. I know the community's excited too.
Cautiously hopeful.
Yeah, cautiously optimistic. And I know that for the most part, the community is at least interested. Eyes are on Wizards to see how this goes.
Absolutely. And I think it's not super controversial to say they've made some pretty big missteps in the last couple of years that have definitely garnered a lot of dissatisfaction. So I think hopefully this is a good way to get some goodwill, show that people's it's tricky. There's a lot of different opinions on what it should be, but sort of get some people's thoughts into the game, making it more inclusive.
Yeah,
it's a tricky thing because D&D is such a massive share of the market.
Yes.
And it's a huge company, and they crank out tons of books per year. And because of that, it's very slow to change. Whereas you can go to a smaller indie creator and play their game, and you can just talk to them about it a lot of the time. You can go meet them and discuss it and get really great insight into why it is the way it is, and they can make changes to it. It's more maneuverable. So hopefully this is a good chance to fix some errors.
Yeah. And a lot of that comes down to the lore stuff, too. I think one of the community in general, our big hold on the game is sometimes forgetting that at the core of D&D, it's not like it's not about social encounters, even though the game does have some mechanics for building that. Like, realistically, you look through most of your abilities, most of the book, it's very skirmish/combat.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think that when we're talking about what this game should be, we got to remember too that D&D 1 is still probably going to be a skirmish combat game.
Yeah, mostly a combat game. Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so here's something that I've been excited about, and we talked a little bit about one of the things you're working on. And you've mentioned that there's a lot of stuff that's coming up, but you have a whole bunch of stuff that you're working on and constantly turning out. So I was wondering if you could give us a little insight on some of the little things that you're working on there, Tristan.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The thing that is fast approaching, I'm hoping to release it sometime in October, mid-October, is a new class that I designed, the Mastermind in 5e. So that's another 5e project. Very sort of Sherlock Holmesy feel, an archetype that I felt like was not fully represented in Dungeons and Dragons right now. But that's a project I'm very, very excited about, and it's almost completely done right now. So it should come out sometime next month.
Yeah, I think that they tried to do that with, I think it was the rogue class, the Mastermind.
Yeah, there was a rogue subclass, and that's kind of where I drew the name from. Because that was sort of that feel, but the base kind of assumptions of the rogue, just like for me and for a friend I was playing with who really wanted to play more of a sort of investigator type character, it just wasn't quite doing it for
rogue
for
was
us. So
not the class to make that.
Exactly.
It's like the Mastermind requires wisdom and charisma, but also dex because you're a rogue. So
yeah. So it definitely it built on that concept a little bit, but it's very distinct from the rogue. It's very distinct from that subclass. No borrowed abilities or anything like that. And overall, I'm really happy with how it turned out. There's I don't know. Have you ever watched the Sherlock Holmes movies with Robert Downey Jr.?
Yes, I watched the first one.
Gotcha. Yeah. There's a great fight scene. I don't remember which movie it's from. I think the first one. Where he plays out the whole thing in his head. And he's like narrating all the things he anticipates and how he'll respond, and then he executes it super quickly. And that is basically what got my mind spinning for the Mastermind. That's kind of the core fantasy of the class, is like insight and intelligence, and a deep understanding of many, many things, and applying that in battle.
I think that's a way better way to execute something called the Mastermind. Level 3 ability to use help as a bonus action just doesn't seem mastermindish to me.
Yeah. Very excited about that.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it, especially as I play more 5e again and get back into it. Tristan, we've been going for about 45 minutes now. If we knock off that time that we spent during the pre-record. So we're kind of getting close to the end here, but I got 2 more questions for you before we really wrap it up.
Okay, sounds good.
So one of the first questions I have, and I ask this on every single episode, but what advice can you give to new creators looking to make their own projects, but they're not sure where to start?
That's a great question. I think the number one piece of advice that I could give is, once you've actually started working on the thing, there are so many great resources out there that you can use. It's so many great people you can meet. I think the best thing you can do is, honestly, don't be afraid to just send an email and ask for advice, or just to chat with people, about stuff you're passionate about, in these circles, because there are so many incredible people that I've met and that have given me such fantastic advice and insight, and I've had wonderful, wonderful conversations with about, you know, a ton of things that goes beyond even just tabletops. So I think don't be afraid to reach out. There's some fantastic people out there, and a lot of them are very happy to just chat.
A lot of them will be excited if you're excited, is a great way that I've seen it. And like a lot of Discords too have people who are just excited about other people's projects. So I can totally agree with that one.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, I think that's phenomenal advice. It's super useful and it's incredibly true. I mean, without the responsive creators, scheduled for launch would not exist. So take this from me. People want to talk about the same stuff that you want to talk about, whether it's your thing or their thing. They want to talk about it. Tristan, where can people find out more about your work and you?
So right now, unfortunately, my website is no longer on the face of this earth.
Oh no!
But my brother and I are working on a combined one, and that's not quite up yet. But if you're interested in it, it should be up soon. And I'm on Twitter. I believe my handle is just like Tristan Fishel or Tristan_Fishel or something like that. And the minute that the website is up, I will send word, and that will have a ton of stuff on it. That'll have links to my previous work, and then also my brother and I are super excited to be working on a lot of stuff right now. An interview podcast. We're working on a newsletter right now, and we're currently in the process of revising a book that we're doing about proactive gaming. And that's all set up and everything. We just have to get the final manuscript done. So tons of good stuff. Hopefully we'll have that ready soon.
Excellent. As always, audience, those links will be down in the description below. It is, by the way, Tristan_Fishel. And for those of you out there, it's the one of that has the lovely cat as the banner. It's a very comfy looking cat.
I'm glad that my cat is a good, a symbol of Tristan Fishel. Cupcake the cat.
Oh, Cupcake, I love it.
Cupcake, yeah.
My dog's name's Maple, so I understand that. Honestly, though, Tristan, thank you so much for joining me on the show this week. It was great to kind of get back into this and have such a wonderfully excited and fun guest to talk about monsters and cool stuff you can do with them in 5e. So I had a great time. Thank you so much for joining me this week.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This was absolutely fantastic.
Well, you are most welcome. And audience, thank you so much for listening. Tristan and the Tomo Monsters have already launched, so go out there and check them out right now on DM's Guild. Links are down in the description below. But until then, take care of yourselves. Have a good night, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye! Thank you so much to Tristan for joining me on the show this week. If it wasn't obvious, I was a bit sick when we recorded this, but the conversation was a great way to get me back into the interviewing process, and I just really appreciated it. Go check out the Tomo Monsters and Tristan's other work, because it's really well done and could really spice up a lot of your 5e games. And thank you so much for listening, audience. If you like what you heard and want to hear more, please let somebody know. We're in that wonky time before the holidays where folks are getting busy and finding new creators to come onto the podcast is getting a little difficult. So, if you are developing something or want me to reach out to someone, I would really appreciate it if you pass those names along to me or to them. Just somebody. I would love to have more creators on. And things are a little slow right now. I'm not going to lie. That's all from me, though. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.